And I made a note for myself on a slide because last week I forgot to start the recording on something. So that was simply a placeholder. Okay, so our aims for today are threefold. First, ensuring that you have the info needed to effectively use these devices in your facilities. As some of you mentioned, you've had them for a while, others have just received them or just received one of them. So we want to make sure that you've got everything you need to get started using those. For those of you who have already started using the machines, we want to hear how it's gone, gather some feedback and learn from your experiences. And then just also, what are the things you still need? Any outstanding questions or any additional materials that we could be providing to support you? And then we'll finish that with a bit of an update on next steps for the project. The plan is kind of divided into 4 parts. First, Joanne's just going to give you a bit more info on the background of the project. Some of you will have heard bits of this before. Some of you might be hearing it for the first time. Then I'm going to run through the 2 devices, starting with the aSKI and followed by the aROW, and aROW rather, and we're going to go into the how do you actually set up the machine, and then how do you adjust it for individual users, and then some considerations when using the devices. And we'll follow that with a discussion, questions and answers. But I'll say this whole thing, we'd like it to be very informal, very conversational. So feel free to interrupt at any point. You can raise your voice, drop a message in the chat, use the hands up feature, whatever you're comfortable with. If you've got a question that I think is going to be addressed on the next slide, I might tell you to just hold off for a moment, but really we can chat and discuss as we go. Any questions right now before we dive into some of the material? Okay. So Joanne, that's over to you then.
Okay, just to give you a little summary of what happened with the project. It actually started back in 2019, and the project was motivated by the fact that there's not a ton of equipment out there that allows wheelchair users to get a good cardio workout. So the researchers sought some funding and were successful getting Craig Nielsen funding to actually adapt a commercially available rowing ergometer so it could be used by wheelchair users. So key to our process is this user-centered design idea. So we get users, coaches, experts, we gather information through interviews, focus groups, and then later as we developed actual designs, we had people trying the machines. And then we worked through this iterative process where we build something, get it out into the community, get it tested, and back and forth and back and forth. So long story short, through lots of iterations, we came up with a final design, and we ended up building 8 rowing ergs that were distributed into the community, a lot at the sites that are represented here today. We also aim to make the project open source so that whatever we developed could be built and replicated by other people, because we know with these assistive technologies are often not big markets. But the goal was really just to get the product out there so people could use it. So after the initial grant funding, we decided that there was some other design iterations that we wanted to do. So we went after some more funding. Again, we're successful and applied to make revisions to the original aROW design, as well as make a similar type of adapter for the ski erg. Again, using that user-centered design process, getting lots of feedback, and now having some sites that actually had the original aROW, we were able to get a little bit more feedback. COVID sent us through lots of hoops and loops, but the happy ending, despite lots of delays, we managed to get machines to 15 community sites pretty much across Canada. And that leads us to where we are today. Many of you guys just received your machines within the last few weeks. So that's the here and now, and I'll talk a little bit about where we go at the end of the session.
Thanks, Joanne. So we're going to start with the aSKI, and yeah, we know that some of you have only recently received this machine. We know that even if you received one of the machines several months ago, you may not have yet set it up or had many people use it. and that this has also been further complicated by COVID. I mean, the last time, a few of you referenced being on the last training session or information session that we had. I remember at that time, many of the facilities were closed or had very, very limited opening. So even though people had maybe set up the machine, they hadn't really been in a place where they could use it. That's fine. We're trying to sort of meet you where you're at. If you haven't taken out of the box yet, that's fine. Don't worry about that. Ask the questions that you think are going to be helpful to you now. And hopefully we can learn from the people who have actually gone a little bit further in the process. So this is the aSKI machine. It is, if you look at this photo, it is the Concept 2 ski ergometer that you've probably seen in many gyms before. The one that I'm showing here is the stand mounted version. And I do have a version of the wall mounted version. So that's kind of as you order it from Concept 2. In terms of setting up the adapted device, there's a few things to remember. So first of all, over here, I've got the two versions. One you can see is mounted to the wall or fastened to the wall, and the other is on this platform. We've got in this group, a few of you have one version, a few of you have the others, and that was usually just based on like space considerations or your facility and whether or not you had the ability to mount something to the wall or needed something that was a little bit more movable. Very important, make sure that that part is installed correctly and according to Concept 2's instructions. I mean, that is paramount to the safety of using these devices. I'm going to show you a video where you can see close up the add-on, the aSKI. And what I'll also mention is it's a little tricky to see in the video, so I'm going to pause it, I think, right at the end of the video. But one of the nice features about this add-on is that it can be moved when it's not in use by someone who requires it. So by a wheelchair user, someone who is going to exercise from the seated position, it can be moved out of the way and used by someone in a standing position. So that was a really important piece of feedback that we got at various processes in this project, that like most facilities don't have room for a bunch of these machines in their gym. And they wanted one that could be used both by a wheelchair user and by someone in a standing position. And I'm also going to zoom in the video a bit or stop the video a bit, where we can show you a bit of the extended cables, as well as the little holders for the cables, which is also, I won't say they're not standard. You can get these from Concept 2, but some people were unaware that you could get extended cables or holders. So I'll show you that in just one moment. So this next slide here is a video of one of our models, Leo, one of our community members. Bjorn might also know him as one of the development skiers on the Paranordic ski team. And he's going to demonstrate just how he approaches the machine and sets it up for him. And like I said, I'll sort of stop the video after we can go back and forth through the video, just so you get a really good close-up look at both how to use the machine, but also how to set it up and how to adjust it. Oops. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to a few points in this video where I can point out a few specific things, and then we can have a little bit of a discussion about them. But what I want to mention is actually right here at the end, because it's not necessarily obvious. You can pivot the aSKI around so that it's out of the way for a standing user. That's one motion, is pretty simply done. One sort of step beyond that, if space is a concern for you, is that you can actually store it down. So it drops down one step further and folds up quite tight to the flywheel there. For those of you who have the version that's on a stand as opposed to the wall mounted, this is a tiny bit more complicated. You kind of have to like, it does collapse down enough that it swings past that sidebar that Leo's holding right there. But like I said, it might not be obvious that it does that unless you play around with the levers a bit. For those of you who have the wall mounted, it's actually is pretty straightforward. It just tucks right away. And like I said, gives you a little more space in your facility. So that's one thing to just, if you haven't already figured that out, that's one thing that we want to point out. The other thing that I want to point out, let's see if I can pause the video right here, is if you look, there's this little clip on the handle. So the handle is green, and you see it's actually, there's a little like bracket or a little holder on the side. If you don't have one or two of these, I guess one for each side, we can send you some. They can also be ordered right from Concept 2. The reason I'm pointing this out is that often in gyms, people don't install these. You can just leave the handles sort of dangling and it's not needed. But if someone's in a seated position, this is going to make it a lot easier for them to reach the handles without assistance. So if you previously weren't using these in your gym on some of these machines, you might want to consider putting them on. And like I said, if you need any of these, we can provide them. The other part of that is that, let me just back up to another image. Let's see, I'll maybe put it right here. Sorry. Is everyone able to see that? I know there's some YouTube ads sort of popping up. Okay. So the cables for this machine come in a couple different lengths. And in various iterations, we found that some of this has to do with preference, some of it has to do with people see a position, and some of it has to do with their range of motion. But what Leo's using right here is an extension to the standard cable. So there's like, you can just kind of see it in the video, but there's like a little clip on where there's an extension to that cable. What we found is that many of the wheelchair users, if they first of all, if they were able to get full extension of the triceps, and that was part of their motion, I mean, they were kind of maxing out at the end of the standard cables. So the devices that we sent out, I believe, Joanna, you can correct me, but I think they have the extensions on them, don't they?
They actually don't have the extensions. I think for probably the majority of users, it should be okay with just the hooks to grab on. But if people have issues with that, I mean, I think that's a quick and easy fix, is to get the extensions. Right. Concept 2 says not required. So it really depends on the level of the athlete and what their capacity and workout goals are.
Okay, thanks, Sharon, for correcting me on that. So it's been sent without the extensions, but we want to make you aware that there is an extension. So if you are getting that feedback from a user that they're like kind of hitting the end of the cables, the other reason this happened, I mean, sometimes it was the individual's like range of motion. But for example, if someone was using a large power chair, that could affect how close they get to the machine. And that was another reason that we sometimes saw people requiring a longer cable. So just to let you know, if that is an issue, or if that's feedback you're receiving, there is a solution to that.
Actually, Andrea, do you want to just comment on the user's position, like how close or far away from the machine?
Yeah, thanks. So if anyone saw the earliest version, which I don't think is many people on this call, but the earliest version, we were experimenting with, well, it was just a little strip of wood on the platform that someone could roll up to, position their casters against, the casters on their chair against, and sort of brace. And what we found in doing that was that you really couldn't find like one spot to put that piece of wood that worked for all users. Some people need to be much closer to the machine. Some people need to be much further back from the machine. There were too many variations in the wheelchairs, things like that. It also, for those who are using just a chair, like a standard chair, no wheelchair, it just creates something that someone could trip over too. So we removed that from this final design. But what we are still recommending is that in general, it seems like you want users to be as close to the machine as possible, somewhere around where their toes or their foot plates of their chair might touch. And then, as demonstrated in this video, basically roll up and put on their brakes. And between the brakes and the lap pad, the cast or that strip of wood that we were playing around with before wasn't adding any value. It wasn't adding any stability at all. Okay, I'm just going to go out of the video here. Okay, maybe before I do that, we're going to move on a bit to the aROW. Apologies, Joanne, aROW machine, and then have some discussion, because I think a lot of the questions actually do apply to both of the machines. And, you know, as Kevin, I think it was mentioned, like, when would you use these? Who would you recommend them to? But does anyone have any questions about the setup of the aSKI machine?
So for the ski machine, so that it doesn't wobble around, that's why you put the wheelchair very close up to it? Or do you put weights along the backside so that it doesn't shake around? Thank you.
Really, the skier shouldn't be wobbling. If it is wobbling, I mean, there's maybe a tiny bit of give. That's probably has to do with the assembly of the ski erg in the first place, or the install of the ski erg in the first place. If it's wall mounted, they tend to be very stable and secure. There's like a tiny bit of flex in them, but not much. The ones that are platform mounted, same thing. They tiny bit of wobble, but not a lot. So if you are getting more than a bit of wobble, you probably want to check the install instructions from Concept 2 about the setup of the ski erg in the first place, or contact Concept 2 support. The platform ones, some of the stability. So previously we had been experimenting with like extending that platform or putting a little bar on it, except so someone could roll up and brace against it. But as it comes, if you have, let me flip back to that. Let me see this picture. If you have this one that's got like a black platform, that's how it comes from Concept 2. And a wheelchair user will be rolling onto that platform, and a standing user will be standing on that platform. And so the machine can't move away from you really already. And then certainly when you put that lap pad and clamp down, yeah, we haven't really heard about any challenges in terms of like trying to stay in position with that. That is an issue that's come up quite a bit with the rowing machine. And I'll show you a few of the things that have been changed in this design, because there was issues with the rowing machine, basically like moving away from the user over time. Or like I said, the ski erg, because of how it's mounted to the wall. Yeah, please do let us know if that's been a problem for you. Bjorn.
Yeah, thanks. On the ski erg, when you swing the support to the center position, the using position, I guess for the rowing one as well, does it lock there, or is it just held in place by the down pressure on the thighs?
It's.
I'm talking about the
there's-
side-to-side swing, like the side-to-side swing, is that locked in or is that kind of free floating?
Yeah, Joanne, can you answer
Yeah,
that?
I can jump in on that. So there's actually magnets in the aSKI. So when it's in the closed position, you'll sort of hear a little click and feel a little click, and then they should lock together. It's not a huge force, you know, you can see when you pull it apart that there's a little bit of resistance, but it just holds it into place enough to get the user centered on there.
Okay.
Angela.
Yeah, I just had a question about the extensions. So if we were using an extension and somebody wanted to use it standing up, do those extensions need to be removed if they're going to be going up higher, or can they be used seated or standing?
I'll say this from more my personal experience, because I sometimes hop on the one in park and I've been able to use it with the extensions in place. I haven't had to remove them. I'm going to actually ask, maybe Bjorn has a comment on that, because you would probably work with both standing and seated skiers and maybe have some idea if that would cause an issue.
Just so I'm clear on that, can Joanne repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, the question was just if we did end up using extensions on the machine, if somebody was standing, could they still use those extensions, or would they need to be removed if you're going up higher with your arms?
From what I understand, they should still be able to use them because the recoil in the head unit of the Concept 2 will just recoil it further, right? It shouldn't be an issue unless the person stands way too far away. Again, it shouldn't affect the standing person at all. In terms of the extension, from what I've seen, if they're using proper technique, as Andrea mentioned, they shouldn't actually need the extensions. Like we're double pulling technique now, you don't go past the hips whether you're standing or sitting. So again, unless there's some other factors like the motorized chair or something else that precludes you from getting the proper position, the extensions shouldn't be necessary. But if you have them on, no, it shouldn't affect it as far as I'm aware.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that I would say the same, that probably best to start without the extensions, because I don't know that you're going to run into problems. I think the only issue that we've seen with the extensions is if somebody's up way too high. So, you know, maybe it's a tall user who's going up really close. You may have interference, but I think for the most people, the standing users shouldn't have an issue with the extensions either.
Maybe on a similar note, the handles that you've been provided with are the standard handles that come with the Concept 2 ski erg. And we did experiment with a few different grips and a few different handles. I personally was starting this project. My assumption was that some users, particularly with spinal cord injuries who might have impaired mobility or dexterity or grip strength, would benefit from a different type of handle. And I know in Park, the facility where I am, we experimented with a few handles off of cross-country ski poles. So, and specifically like the grips that wrap around the hands. And actually for most of our users at Park, they came back and said they preferred the green rubber grip that you hold on to. Which, like I said, kind of surprised me. I thought we would see more users wanting like that wraparound grip or an active hand grip that you sometimes see in adapted gyms, but there is no reason you couldn't. I mean, they're actually pretty easily swapped out. We in Park do have a couple people who actually come with their own grips and just clip them in. So we've provided the version that seems to be preferred and usable by most people, but that is something we can provide you with a few photos of other ones we tried if that's something that you're encountering. And if you're getting someone coming in with their own grips, like an active hand grip, yeah, they could certainly, there's no reason they couldn't do some experimentation of their own and find something that worked for them. Okay, I'll maybe move on to the rowing machine, knowing that we can always come back and that some questions actually probably apply to both of the machines. So this is the aROW device. The image here is actually of the latest iteration, the final iteration, although perhaps with lacking a bit of the final bit of paint. The colors of some of the parts are maybe a little different. It does differ pretty significantly from the device that a few of you would have installed in your facilities. So the one you've recently received is quite a bit different from the last time we had a call. I'll go through the major changes as well as just sort of an overview. So a couple things that we've changed on this latest iteration is this base platform. So I think it was Kevin who just mentioned, you know, issues with like, how do you keep these machines in one spot in your gym? I was a competitive rower for many years. We used to joke that you could race a Concept 2 across the floor of a gym. Like the way they are designed for whether a standing rower or an adapted rower, they don't anchor into the floor and they do tend to move a bit. This was particularly an issue with, or became even more of an issue with some of the modifications where there was actually like the possibility that the erg would move away from the user in their wheelchair as they started rowing. If you think about how these come sort of in the unmodified version where there's a seat on a rail, at least then when they were moving across the floor, the user was like moving across the floor with them. But with the wheelchair, you had the device that was moving away. So when we spoke with some of you last time, yeah, the solutions you were coming up with was like to put this on a yoga mat, which made the floor a little grippier, or to put a 45-pound plate at the front, helped a bit. However, I think in this version, we've solved that problem, I would say. So the devices are now coming with this base platform, that wooden platform. And there's a couple, Joanne, you can correct me. I think there's a couple different sort of sizes for that, right? Or
yeah, the issue is the original row machine that we built the version 1 on stopped getting made by Concept 2. So they changed from the Model E to now something that's sort of something between the Model D and the Model E, and that changed the geometry a little bit. So half of you guys have probably got the old Model E's and then half have got the new ones. So similar, but you'd notice that the base is just a little different, and that has to do with the geometry of the height and the pull angle.
so essentially where, let's see if I've got I'm not sure if I've got like a whiteboard device here where I can actually point, but maybe I do here. Right here, can you see that? Where the Concept 2 is attaching, like that might be slightly higher or lower for some of you, and that's based on like the height of the machine, but overall it's a pretty similar design across them all. So what we've done is it's removing the rail where the sliding seat went, and then the flywheel and the arm are attaching to this piece of wood, which is then a platform that a wheelchair user can roll onto and position themselves there. So now the machine should not move away from them at all. So that was one of the big changes. The other big change that's been made is to the handle. So previously we were working with a few different handles, including the one that comes standard, the Concept 2 rowing machines, as well as a couple like split handles that were actually two different pieces. And there were issues with both of those. The split handles wasn't providing a lot of stability. And then the standard handle was tending to hit users at the chest pad, which I'll show you. So this is the final version of the handle. It's a curved piece of pipe or a bent piece of pipe, and it actually slides into a piece of PVC tubing that's attached. So it sort of stores there, and that's got a dual function that you'll see when I show you the video. So that's the other change, is this handle. You probably haven't seen that on, you haven't seen that until you received your latest or the new devices. One comment there, watch for this in the video. You'll see Leo model it, but to get the handle out of that holder, think about the angle of that PVC tube and think about lifting it up and then out. So we do see a few people trying to like sort of yank it out of that PVC, and Joanne might be able to explain this, but I'll show you the video. I just want you to pay attention to how that handle comes out of the PVC tube, and then we can discuss it a bit. Okay, so.
And just while you're watching that video, one thing I'll mention that is new to the people who had this earlier version, it's the gas spring that's on the machine. So that's like the gas spring that you have at the back of your trunk of a car that allows it to descend quickly or slowly, sorry. But in this case, we're using that function to actually have the lap pad lock into the user's lap, just so that they can get a really secure position on the erg.
Thanks. I'll be sure I'll pause the video in a moment so you can see that spring as well. So I'll play it through once and then we can go back to different parts of the video. So a few things in that video, maybe just to highlight. I'll start by what Joanne just mentioned about the addition of this new hydraulic piece. So let's see if I can get a good close-up of it. There. Let's see. So right Right here, I guess. This is new on this version. And as Joanne mentioned, it's kind of like I don't even know what you call it.
It's a gas spring, like in the car. But
Gas
but
spring.
what it's doing is when you release that brake lever, that gas spring is wanting to compress the lap pad into the user's lap. So it's great for locking the person in. Where it gets harder is actually getting the lap pad out of the person's lap again, because now you're fighting against a gas spring. And that's why we have them use the handle as a lever, particularly to push it away.
Yeah, thanks. So the previous version didn't have that. It basically relied on you like pressing down and then turning the dial to hold it in place. And what we were hearing was that a lot of people, the position was a bit awkward and they just couldn't get enough leverage, or they needed assistance in order to get a really tight fit. With this, most people can get a pretty tight fit unassisted. And then also, well, I'm just trying to, my mouse has kind of disappeared on the screen. So I'm gonna see if I can restart the video. But there is now like the little handbrake, kind of like a bicycle brake that assists to lift it back up. So it also does not require that much force to lift it back up. Sorry, excuse me one moment. I need to perhaps stop the screen share in order to get this back.
And so just to be clear on that, when the handbrake isn't depressed, it's locked into position. So if you want the user to either tighten it into their lap or release it, you have to depress the hand lever and push away or push in.
Apologies, I'm just having a bit of technical difficulty here for one moment.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, Andrea, I can explain about pulling the handle out of the holster. Is that a good idea?
Yep, that's great, thanks.
So we've noticed some users have challenges getting that row handle out of the holster. It's important it goes back in and out of the holster because, like I said, that's the lever for activating or for positioning the lap pad against the gas spring. But the important thing to realize with taking the handle out is it actually has to be pulled out of the holster first. Some users are just trying to grab it and pull it towards them. But if you just take a minute, look at the way that holster, and when I say holster, I'm meaning what's the white tube in this video here. In some cases, it's a black tube, but just pull the handle up directly parallel in the same direction as that holster, and then once it's at the top, then you can switch it around to position it. So it's fairly obvious once you think about it, but when people are having challenges, that's probably what it is.
Sorry, I think I'm back. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So then maybe I've got a slide here that just has some of the other things to consider. So I'll flip to that and we can go back and forth to the images. So in addition to the changes for basically being able to like lower the lap pad, we've also made some changes to the shape and the size of the pad. So on the older version, I think we actually do have an image of it in one of the slides. Right here, you would have had these sort of circular lap pads and chest pads. They look, I mean, you've probably seen a cylinder-like pad on other weightlifting machine in the gym. These also didn't give that great a fit for a lot of people. So that's why we've made the switch to these flatter pads that you can see. So that's another big change. And then probably the final change.
Andrea, to interrupt here, but just an important part about the pads too is that they rotate. they're on a pivot, so you can swivel them to align with the user's lap. Some of them are a little bit stiff, and especially if they've been shipped, you may not even realize that they pivot, but give them a little wiggle and you'll see how they can be reoriented.
So essentially that flat pad can sort of tilt into someone's lap a bit. It can tilt a bit this way. And on the chest, it can be, yeah, it pivots a bit to give a really tight fit. Whereas the previous round ones were sort of like, they were in one position. And they didn't give the same tight fit. The other thing that's been changed pretty significantly, and I'll go back to the video, but in the last version with the chest pad, you had very limited range in adjusting that. So people could either use the chest pad or not use it, but if they were using it, there wasn't a whole lot of range for people of different heights or different seated positions. So the feedback we were getting there is that for a lot of users, it was actually hitting closer to their neck, right, than their chest. So I'm going to go back and play the video, just that part where Leo is adjusting the chest pad, because that's a pretty important adjustment to make, or to understand what the options are there. So you'll notice here that he can adjust the angle. He can kind of come seated a little further forward or a little further back. That's really going to be dependent on the user, dependent on their core strength, what muscles they're able to activate, and what type of chair they're in. So generally speaking, we're advising people to sort of position that so that you are braced against the back of your chair. However, a user who actually has the core muscles and the function probably wouldn't use that chest pad at all, and would use it without the chest pad, as Leo's doing right here. So someone who's actually looking to engage their core and has the ability to do that would go without a chest pad. And someone who is using the chest pad, like I said, general advice would be to use the chest pad to brace them against the back of their chair. And I've got a few more slides that give you a bit of guidelines on that. It is detachable. And another new addition has been this little spot to store it when it's not in use. And I'm going to pause right here, maybe even go back a second. If you watch, when he slides it in, there's a little notch so that it fits right. It fits in and it doesn't move. So there's like just a little notch that's been cut there where it clips in, and then he tightens it. And then he can also adjust the length of it as well as the angle of it. So just in terms of making the decision of when someone might use a chest pad, or when you might suggest they start with the chest pad versus starting without it, it's going to be based on whether or not someone has core stability, the function of their core muscles. So if a user can reach forward from the waist and return to an upright seated position without assistance, we're recommending they try it without the chest pad. For individuals with spinal cord injuries, that's usually someone with an injury around the T7 level who is using it without a chest pad, whereas those with injuries at the T5 level or above are typically preferring and benefiting from the chest pad. So if you know the individuals you're working with, or you can use that as a starting point. There is some individual certain preference here, and people are going to have different abilities, but that's when we've been trying it at Park and surveying the people at Park, usually those with the injuries at T7 and below prefer it without the chest pad. T5 and above are preferring it with the chest pad. And that's where we're recommending that you start. In terms of positioning, this is a change from our previous recommendations. Prior, we were saying start by positioning the chest pad and then position the lat pad. That was because on the older versions of the machine, the chest pad didn't have nearly as much range. So you kind of had fewer options. So we said start with the chest pad. Now we're saying start by positioning the lat pad, getting that position right. You want it as tight as possible. You want it at the bend. So where someone's bent, their lat bend is. And the new system should actually make getting a tight fit a lot easier to achieve compared to the previous models. For the chest pad, if you are using it, somewhere around the xiphoid process, which is that little pink bit of bone, tends to be a little lower for female users, a little higher for male users. That's where it's going to be a comfortable fit. What you want to avoid is that green bit. So some people, we have seen some people positioning it a little too high, which it can really get in the way of breathing while exercising, or just put a little too much stress on the collarbone. So I've been telling the women in park, I mean, you're putting this where your bra strap goes. And beyond that, it's a comfort level. People somewhere in that range, wherever is comfortable. The nice thing, like I said, is the latest version does give you a lot more options and a lot more likelihood of finding a comfortable fit. The other big change, which I already mentioned, but just to show you a bit the reasoning behind it, is that is a new handle. If you think about the standard handle that comes with the Concept 2, what was happening is if someone was using the chest pad, the handle was hitting the chest pad, whereas that big curve shape allows the handle to go around the chest pad and people still to pull back quite far. So basically they're bringing, let's see if I can bring it, but they're bringing the handle to their body now, and the handle is curving out and going around the chest pad. So that's the reason for the new design. And then it also has that added bonus of providing something to actually hold on to while you're pulling the lat pad up and down. Before I move on to sort of general, does anyone have any questions about the rowing machine or the setup of the rowing machine?
I found that the recommendations for the chest pad or not on the rowing was very useful. If they can bend down or not, that was very useful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I mean, you're not always going, first of all, you might not only be dealing with individuals who have spinal cord injuries, you might be dealing with people who have incomplete spinal cord injuries. So there is a lot of range, but that sort of test of like, can you lean forward and return to a seated position unassisted? Most people can answer that question, right? So that does give hopefully a good starting point. Anything else? Okay, a few things that apply probably to both of these devices. They are intended as cardio workouts. These machines were originally designed primarily as a cardio workout. There is some element of strength involved, but probably one of the mistakes or misuses of these machines that we see in gyms, whether you're talking about the adapted versions or non-adapted versions, is people coming in and cranking that damper up to the level 10 because that's the heaviest setting, and then really trying to power their way through the movement. That's not how you're going to get the most benefit from these physiologically. It's also can result in some injuries and overloads. So we're really just reminding people, this isn't unique to the adapted versions, but we're reminding people these are intended as cardio machines. So you're looking for a combination of stroke rate or cadence and power. And when you're working with a client or whether you're using the machine yourself, when you're adjusting that setting on the damper or the flywheel, I like to think about it as the gears on a bike. I don't go for my heaviest gear all the time. I'm going for the gear where I feel like I can kind of get a cadence that's, efficient. It feels like there's resistance, but not too much resistance that I'm stopping and starting every pedal stroke. The same thing when I'm rowing or skiing on one of these. I'm looking for something where I can kind of get into a fluid motion. And that's probably going to be a setting somewhere between 3 and 6 for most users, which will probably surprise a few people who are used to going into the gym and seeing these set out of 10 because that's where they're going to get the best workout. So encouraging people to sort of set this where they can keep some momentum going and keep a fluid motion is actually where they're going to get the most efficient workout on these. That applies to both of the machines. And I did also just, I've got a photo here of the monitors in case you haven't used them in a while or haven't taken a close look at the while, but they do provide, both of them provide several different options for displays. And they'll measure watts as a power output, or they'll give you splits. I mean, these are entirely preferences, but what we're going for is kind of working with people to get into a cardio workout and a more fluid motion that they might be able to maintain for a period of time, as opposed to cranking that up to a 10, doing 10 repeats, and then moving to the next machine. That's really the end of what we have prepared. So maybe I'll open this up to like what questions people have. What are areas where you feel like you could use a little bit more direction or advice in terms of making these as usable, as productive in your facilities? Yes, Bjorn.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate the description of the intended use in terms of the power and not a strength unit, starting off an easy gear. I guess my question is for those who are more fit or progressed using these, how suitable are the aROW and aSKI adaptions for like an intensity for 15-second intensity burst? I mean, our sit skiers use them on a regular basis. They have their sleds bolted to the floor, and then they sit in their sled. They can hammer as hard as they want. They're not going to move, but they're built for it. So in terms of people in a wheelchair, how much could you do once you get that high cycle, high frequency and intensity going and still be safe in there?
Quite a bit.
Okay.
As in, I have no concerns about, I know the para athletes, I kind of know the outputs. I've had Jessica Hayes in here with a few of her athletes and,
Okay.
Watching Leo and stuff like that. The question I think becomes to me is like whether or not the paranoric athletes who have their custom sleds, will they benefit from having I think so. I think the brace actually provides a solid platform that they would probably benefit from. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't have concerns that they shouldn't be using it for any of their high burst intensity workouts.
Okay, so your concerns was more about the new users for in terms of injury and possible muscle strain.
Yeah. So I mean, we've also had so we've been testing on our facility. Granted, most of our users are not elite athletes, although we do have a few athletes who have considerable experience in different sports and have been elite at various points. And one of the things like that we were looking for was, for example, is there any concerns around like abrasion, bruising, particularly for someone who doesn't have sensation and, maintaining like skin and looking for anything that could be causing an injury to the skin or something would be really, and what we found is that with the latest version of the pads, the flat pads, no one has reported any concerns. Whereas with the round version, we were getting, a few people saying like, oh, I need to be really careful about how I position this. And they were like stopping a check to make sure it wasn't sliding or anything like that. No one actually reported any injuries, but with the flat pads definitely eliminated a lot of the concerns that we did have.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone, can you tell us, have you set these up? Have you been using them? What's been the experience of using them?
Yeah, for the rowing, the chest pad is installed on the machine, but the what you were talking about, the spring that is similar to a car trunk, that was not installed because no one knew what to do with that. So now we know what to do with it, and how to store the long handle into that type of device. So I'll make sure that is installed. Thank you.
So just a great comment there, and I'm glad this session was useful for you guys. Just be aware too, I think everybody should have access to these videos and some basic instructions. If for whatever reason you didn't get that, please let me know and I will forward that on. But super helpful for people to be able to watch that video, because I think you've all taken in a lot of information today, and it's not until you're sitting in front of the machine and trying to remember how that all comes together that I'm sure the questions will come. And I just to add to Andrea's question, has anybody had any issues with setting up the machines as they came out of the box, particularly the people that the boxes were shipped to them, like in Saskatchewan? And I don't think we've got anybody here from Ontario, but there was a little bit trickier setup there. It came to our attention that some of the pieces or some of the machines that were shipped for the aROW, the wooden base actually doesn't have a hole drilled in to attach the adapter. If you open your box and find out that that's you, please let me know and I'll walk you through the steps about making that hole.
I mean, the other part of this is, to date, we've provided very, very little direction or guidance in terms of, training programs or technique videos or anything like that, largely because Concept 2 already has a very, very good, a store of training plans and examples and things like that. But that is something that we're looking at for the next, I guess, the next stage is like, what kinds of support materials would be helpful to you or helpful to your community members? Are there particular things that you've got the instructions that Joanne just mentioned? We're working on updating a few of the photos. So some of the instructions had photos of the old round lap pads and stuff like that. And we're going to be putting all of that on the website, as well as their PDFs that could be printed out and could go on the wall of your gym, particularly if you're in a gym with you don't know all the users and people drop in and you might not be there to provide instruction. So, sort of the images that you see next to lots of weight machines that have suggestions for users, we're going to be updating that, posting it on our website, can provide copies. But is there anything else that would be helpful?
So I'm guessing it may be early days since people just got their machines, but keep in mind this project is ongoing, both from the development point of view of the actual machines, as well as the training programs that Andrea was talking about. So right now we don't have a really formal process in place to get that feedback. We will get something organized soon. But in the short term, if you have comments, suggestions, questions, please email me and I will make sure they get sent to the appropriate person and hopefully acted on.
And Kevin, you also mentioned early on, like the question about like, when would you recommend one of these machines over another, or who are these machines intended for? I mean, honestly, I'm not sure I would recommend one over the other. They're two different machines. They both provide a cardio workout, but one of the reasons for wanting to develop the ski machine after having developed the rowing machine was that we do think it has some unique benefits that, for example, in park, I know a lot of our users with spinal cord injuries, first of all, they always just want some variety, some options, right? As we said, there aren't a ton of machines that are adapted for wheelchair users. So it was simply looking at like what types of machines already exist in a lot of gyms and how could they be modified. But what attracted me in particular to the ski machine is looking around park and realizing that a lot of our cardio machines don't offer the same range of motion of the ski machine. They don't give anything where your arms go above your head. And the ski machine is like the one machine in our facility where the arms go above the head. So one of the benefits of that is that, first of all, shoulder injuries and generally repetitive injuries are a big concern for wheelchair users. So if someone's coming to your gym several times a week and they're using the same machine every single time, they are putting themselves at, that's a risk for a repetitive use injury. And on top of that, a lot of the machines that are in the gym use the same muscles and the same movements that individuals might be using for their everyday wheeling, for their everyday mobility. So we really wanted to offer something in the gym that like gave a different motion. So regardless of whether or not you consider like it better than the rowing machine, probably not, but like it is something different. So that's one of the ways we're encouraging people at park to think about their workout, is just like to think about how they're mixing up their workout and to make sure that they're doing different movement patterns and not always coming to the gym and using the same machine. And the ski machine, I think, is pretty unique that way. Talking with a few of the exercise physiologists at iCord, they are certainly recommending like that over the head range of motion as something that wheelchair users should be incorporating into their workouts. So that, to me, I think is the most attractive part. But the rowing machine is also a different movement than a lot of, for example, the hand cycles, or doing a workout outside, rolling a wheelchair. So it, you know, first of all, it's a pulling motion as opposed to the pushing motion. You can't see me, but as opposed to the pushing motion, it's a pulling motion. So once again, it's mixing up the type of movement, and that itself would have benefits as well. So I'd probably say recommend both of them. Recommend that people mix it up.
Thank you very much.
If no one has anything else to ask, we can wrap it up there. But remember that we are looking for feedback. We're here to be a resource to you. So as you start using the machines, feel free to reach out to us if you encounter any issues or have any questions. We can provide copies of today's video for if you've got other staff members or community members who want to see it. And we do have, before I forget, Joanne has an update on the project and next steps as well.
Yeah, okay. So a couple of different things, ways we're moving forward. One is we are now trying to figure out ways that we can get these out to the broader community. We've had a few questions, both through the web and through people who've seen these machines and said, hey, where can I get one of these? And the sad news is right now we have no idea. But we have recently started discussions with a group called Makers Making Change. And what we're talking about is creating a kit type of idea where we create the custom pieces and maybe some instruction on where you buy the other pieces. And then they can be shipped to different people to put together and make their own, no matter where they're living. So that's a very exciting thing for us. And I would encourage you, if you get anybody coming into your centers and asking about that, again, they can contact me. I'm keeping a list of people who are interested in getting these machines. And hopefully soon we will have a mechanism for getting them out there at relatively low cost.
It's also open source. So if someone does have the ability, the workshop, that we can provide the instructions, but we understand that that's not going to be an option for a lot of people.
Yeah, and there's a few pieces, you know, originally we were hoping that anybody, any maker anywhere, or a guy with a wood shop could make them. We've realized it's not quite as easy as that, but you know, if we were able to supply a couple of custom pieces, we think that the rest of it could be fabricated as a kit. The other idea that we're looking at is taking a similar concept into a home version. So as much as that Concept 2 is a fantastic machine, it's out of price range for a lot of people as a home device. So we have found the aSKI online, which sells for under $300. And we've been looking at an adaptation that would allow that aROW to actually sit on that machine. And again, we'll come up with some open source kit that people could buy so they could develop these and keep them in their own homes. So right now we've made a couple of those prototypes. We're just currently starting testing with that. And we're going to be starting a study very shortly to gauge the effectiveness of the home machine. And I guess the final thing that I would love to point out is we've got a couple of students that are doing a study right now comparing the effectiveness of the effectiveness and usability of both the aROW and the aSKI. So there's a flyer that Andrea's got up here on the screen, and I believe all of you guys got a copy of it sent out by Angie yesterday, but we'd love it if you could post this near the machines in your facilities or share it with anybody that you think has been using the machines, because again, getting that feedback on how well these are working really helps us take the designs to the next level. If you just look at the version 1 that we did in the first project and the version 2, you'll see how all that input really helped us move forward to something much closer to where we want it to be. So I think that's it. I can't think of anything else. Andrea, you got any further thoughts?
I think that's it. Yeah, we've had a few people join the call since we first started. So maybe I'll just ask you to stay on the line for one moment so that John can make note of who's here. And yeah, otherwise, thanks everyone for making time for this, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, everybody.